What if the reason your life feels chaotic, unfulfilling, or just slightly off isn't because the world is broken, but because you are standing in your own way? That's not a comfortable thought, but Jordan Peterson isn't here to make you comfortable. He's here to tell you the truth, and sometimes the truth is the most useful thing anyone can give you. 12 Rules for Life is one of those rare books that feels like it was written specifically for you, even though millions of people have said the exact same thing. It's part psychology lecture, part ancient mythology, part brutal self-examination, and part surprisingly tender conversation between a man who has seen real suffering and a reader who is quietly wondering why life feels so much harder than it should. So let's walk through it together, not as a summary, not as a checklist, but as a real exploration of ideas that could genuinely change how you see yourself and the world. Let's start where Peterson starts, with a lobster. Yes, a lobster. Stay with me here, because this is actually one of the most important biological facts you'll ever hear explained in plain language. Lobsters have been around for over 350 million years, long before dinosaurs, long before trees. They have a nervous system, and within that nervous system, they have a mechanism that tracks social status. When a lobster wins a fight, its posture changes. It stands taller. It takes up more space. Its brain releases serotonin, the same chemical that flows through your brain when you feel confident and capable. When a lobster loses a fight, the opposite happens. It shrinks. It becomes timid. Its brain chemistry shifts, and it's more likely to lose the next fight too. Now here's what makes this extraordinary. Lobsters and humans share an ancient common ancestor. The neurological architecture that governs status, posture, and confidence in a lobster is so old, so fundamental, that it still exists in your brain today. You are walking around with circuitry that was built before complex life even developed on this planet. And what does that mean for you? It means that your posture, your presence, your willingness to take up space in a room isn't just about confidence. It's about biology. It's about signals that your body sends to the world and receives back from it. When you stand up straight, when you carry yourself like someone who belongs where they are, your own nervous system responds differently. You think more clearly. You feel more capable. Others treat you differently, and that feeds back into how you feel again. This is Peterson's first rule. Stand up straight with your shoulders back. And it is not about faking confidence or pretending to be someone you're not. It is about choosing, deliberately, to present yourself as someone who is engaged with life rather than defeated by it. It is about refusing to signal to the world and to yourself that you've already given up. There's something deeply honest in this idea. So many people walk through life hunched, apologetic, shoulders caved in, like they're trying to take up as little space as possible, like their very existence is an inconvenience. Peterson is saying, stop doing that. Not just for other people's sake, but for yours. Now the next idea is one that might sting a little. Peterson asks you to consider something. Would you treat a dog better than you treat yourself? Most people say yes without hesitating, and he has evidence to back this up. Studies have shown that people are significantly more likely to fill a prescription for their pet than to fill their own prescription. They will make sure their dog eats well, exercises, sleeps enough, is treated with care. And then those same people will neglect themselves completely. Why? Peterson has a fascinating answer rooted in theology and psychology. He argues that humans have a kind of innate sense of their own corruption. We know ourselves too well. We see our own failures, our petty thoughts, our jealousy, our cowardice, our moments of cruelty. And because we know all of that, we feel, somewhere deep in our unconscious, that maybe we don't deserve care. But here's the thing. You can acknowledge your flaws, all of them, honestly, without concluding that you are therefore worthless. A dog might chew the furniture and steal food off the table, but you still care for the dog. You can extend that same logic to yourself. Rule 2 is treat yourself like someone you are responsible for helping. Not like someone you are trying to please or coddle, but like someone in your care. Someone whose well-being genuinely matters. What would you actually do differently if you believed that? Would you sleep more? Eat better? Stop saying yes to things that drain you completely. Stop tolerating situations that are slowly destroying you. This rule runs deeper than self-care advice. It's about the relationship you have with your own existence. Do you think your life matters enough to be taken care of? Peterson says it does. And not because he's trying to flatter you, but because he has spent decades sitting with people in genuine suffering. And he has seen what happens when people treat their own lives as expendable. Moving forward, Peterson talks about the people in your life, specifically the ones who might not be good for you. He tells a story from his own childhood in a small Canadian town called Fairview. He had a friend who was brilliant and funny and chaotic, someone who brought trouble wherever he went. And Peterson reflects honestly on the nature of these friendships, the ones where you tell yourself you're helping someone, but really, part of you might be choosing them because their chaos makes your own life look manageable by comparison. Rule 3 is make friends with people who want the best for you. And this sounds obvious until you realize how many people in your life don't actually want the best for you. Not because they're villains, but because they're drowning themselves, and misery genuinely does love company. Peterson is not saying abandon struggling people. He is saying be honest about the difference between someone who is down and fighting to get back up, and someone who has decided the floor is where they live and wants you down there with them. Your compassion is a resource. It is not infinite. And spending it entirely on people who will consume it without growing is not kindness. It is a slow, mutual destruction. He also makes a point that cuts even deeper. Sometimes we refuse to improve our own lives because doing so would mean leaving certain people behind. And that guilt keeps us stuck. The real act of courage is sometimes growing anyway, and trusting that the people who are genuinely good for you will either grow with you or celebrate you from where they are. Now comes one of the most psychologically important rules in the book, and it's one of the most misunderstood. Compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is today. We live in an era of relentless comparison. Social media makes it catastrophically easy to measure your life against the highlight reel of everyone else's. And the comparison is always humiliating because you're comparing your insides, all your doubts and failures and private struggles, to someone else's carefully curated outside. Peterson's solution is radical in its simplicity. Stop. Just stop comparing yourself to other people. Instead, look at yourself yesterday. Are you slightly more honest today? Slightly more disciplined? Did you do one thing today that your past self wouldn't have done? That's progress. Real, measurable, meaningful progress. This isn't about lowering your standards. It's about pointing your ambition in a direction where it actually makes sense. When you compete with yourself, you always have perfect information. You know exactly what you're working with, what your obstacles are, what your history is. That's a fair fight. Competing with someone else, especially someone whose struggles you can't see, is not a fair fight. It's a game designed to make you feel bad about yourself indefinitely. He also talks about discipline within the family, and here Peterson takes a position that will make some people uncomfortable. Rule 5 is, do not let your children do anything that makes you dislike them. This one needs unpacking, because it sounds harsh on the surface. But Peterson's point is subtle and important. Children need limits, not because they are inherently bad, but because they are inherently untamed. They come into the world needing to learn what is acceptable, what is kind, what is sustainable, and the way they learn that is through the loving, consistent, firm guidance of their parents. When parents fail to set those limits, out of exhaustion, out of a desire to be liked, out of a misguided belief that any restriction is a form of harm, they produce children who are genuinely difficult to be around. Children who hit, who scream, who have no concept of other people's feelings. And then those children go into the world, and the world is far less forgiving than a loving parent. The world does not love them unconditionally. The world will correct them, harshly, for the failures their parents refuse to address. Peterson says that discipline is not the opposite of love. It is a form of love. The parent who corrects a child's behavior is doing the harder, more loving thing than the parent who lets everything slide to avoid conflict. And this principle extends beyond parenting. It's about not allowing the people in your life to behave in ways that corrode the relationship. It's about being honest enough to say, that's not okay. Because the alternative is a slow buildup of resentment that eventually destroys everything. Here is the rule that might be the most transformative and also the most demanding. Rule 6. Set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. Peterson describes a temptation that many intelligent, frustrated people feel. When life is difficult, when things aren't working, it can feel satisfying to conclude that the problem is out there. The system is corrupt. Society is broken. Other people are stupid and selfish. And maybe some of that is true. Maybe a lot of it is. But here's the question Peterson presses on. What have you actually done, specifically in your own life, in your own house, with your own choices, to make things better? He tells the story of the Columbine shooters, young men who looked at the world and decided it was so terrible, so irredeemable, that the only logical response was mass destruction. Peterson is not sympathetic to them, but he is analytically honest. He says that the world is full of people who sit in judgment of everything around them, while their own lives are in complete disarray. And he is asking, what gives you the right to condemn the world before you've even cleaned your own room? Start there. Literally, clean your room. Not as a metaphor, although it is a powerful one. Actually clean it. Bring order to your immediate environment. Then your relationships. Then your career. Then your community. Work outward from where you are. Because the person who has actually tried to fix what's within their control has earned the right to speak about what's broken outside of it. The person who hasn't is just performing outrage. This is one of those ideas that sounds small and becomes enormous the longer you sit with it. Now we arrive at the chapter that is perhaps the philosophical heart of the book. Pursue what is meaningful, not what is expedient. This is where Peterson reaches into the deepest territory of human experience. He talks about the concept of sacrifice, which appears in virtually every religion and mythology across human history. The idea that you give up something in the present for something better in the future. You don't eat everything in front of you now so that you have food later. You work hard today so that your life tomorrow is better. You tell the uncomfortable truth now so that the relationship can be stronger later. This is meaning. Meaning is what happens when you orient your actions towards something that matters, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. And then there is expedience. Expedience is what you choose when you're just trying to feel better right now. The extra drink. The avoidance of the difficult conversation. The Netflix series instead of the work you know you need to do. The lie instead of the truth. Expedience feels good in the moment. Meaning feels difficult in the moment, but sustains you over time. Peterson argues that the meaningless life is not neutral. It is actively dangerous. When you drift without purpose, when you choose expedience over meaning again and again, something inside you deteriorates. You feel it, even if you can't name it. That hollow feeling, that vague sense that something is wrong, even when nothing specific is going wrong. The antidote, he says, is not happiness. It is meaning. And meaning comes from bearing responsibility, from taking on a burden willingly because you believe it matters. Raising children, building something, telling the truth, caring for someone who is suffering. These things are not easy. They are also not hollow. Here's the question I want you to sit with for just a moment. What are you tolerating in your life? Not because it's fine, but because changing it would require more courage than you've been willing to summon. Think about that. There's usually an answer. And Peterson would say that the answer to that question is probably pointing you directly at where your next meaningful step is. Rule 8 is, tell the truth, or at least don't lie. Peterson makes a distinction here that is philosophically precise and practically important. There is telling the truth, which is active and requires courage, and there is not lying, which is a more achievable starting point. He's not necessarily asking you to blurt out every difficult truth in every moment. He's asking you to stop constructing false realities in your speech, in your relationships, in your own mind. He describes what he calls life lies. These are the stories we tell ourselves to avoid confronting reality. I'll deal with it later. It's not really that bad. They don't actually mean it. If I just wait, things will get better on their own. These lies are not harmless. Every life lie requires you to maintain a whole ecosystem of smaller lies to keep the original one standing. And over time, the structure becomes so elaborate that you can no longer see the truth at all. You're living in a fiction you've created and wondering why everything feels so unstable. When you commit to truth-telling, even small, uncomfortable truths, something interesting happens. Your life begins to reorganize itself around reality. Problems that you've been avoiding become visible, and once visible, they become solvable. Relationships that have been sustained by pleasant fictions either transform or end, and both of those outcomes, as painful as they can be, are better than continuing the pretense. He also makes a point about the way lies corrupt the person who tells them. When you lie, even in small ways, you become someone who lies, and then you have to manage the version of yourself that lies, and keep track of what that version said, and maintain the gap between who you are and who you're pretending to be. That gap is exhausting. Truth-telling, even when it's hard, is ultimately less work. Rule 9 is assume that the person you are listening to might know something you don't. Peterson is talking about the lost art of genuine listening, not the listening we usually do, where we're waiting for the other person to finish so we can say what we already decided to say, but actual listening, curious listening, listening that treats the other person as a source of knowledge rather than an obstacle to your own expression. He talks about a therapeutic technique where you summarize what someone has said to them before you respond, and you summarize it so accurately that they feel genuinely heard. This is harder than it sounds, because to do it, you actually have to listen. And when you listen that closely, you often discover that the other person's perspective has merit that your initial dismissal didn't account for. This rule is also about intellectual humility. You don't know everything. The person who disagrees with you is not necessarily stupid or malicious. They might have information, experience, or a perspective that you lack. And the only way to access it is to actually listen, with the genuine intention of understanding rather than winning. In a world that is getting louder and more polarized every year, this rule is not just personally useful. It might be culturally necessary. Now we reach one of the most precise and actionable rules in the book. Rule 10 is be precise in your speech. Peterson describes how vague and imprecise language creates vague and imprecise problems. When something in your life is wrong, but you refuse to define it clearly, it remains a nameless dread, an ambient anxiety that you can't address because you can't locate it. The moment you articulate it precisely, it transforms from a fog into an object, and objects can be dealt with. He uses the example of a troubled relationship. If you say to yourself, "Things aren't great with us," that's vague. That's deniable. That lets you avoid the conversation indefinitely. But if you say, "We haven't had a genuine conversation in 3 months. We argue every time we discuss money, and I feel invisible when we're with your friends." Those are specific, nameable problems, and specific problems have specific solutions. Precision is courage in language form, because to be precise is to commit to reality, to say exactly what is wrong, what you need, what you believe, what you've done. And that commitment makes you responsible in a way that vagueness never does. Rule 11 is, do not bother children when they are skateboarding. This might be the most provocative chapter title in the book, and the idea behind it is one that Peterson feels deeply. He is arguing against the overprotective, risk-eliminating tendency in modern culture that treats danger as the ultimate enemy. When children take physical risks, they are learning something essential. They're learning the boundaries of their own capability. They're learning that failure is survivable. They're learning courage, which cannot be taught in a classroom. It can only be practiced in situations where failure is genuinely possible. He extends this to the broader culture, where the impulse to remove all danger, all hierarchy, all competition, and all discomfort has produced something surprising. Not safety, but fragility. People who have never been allowed to fail have no idea how to handle failure. People who have never taken a risk have no idea who they really are. And he draws a line here between genuine compassion, which helps people develop the strength to handle difficulty, and what he calls pathological compassion, which eliminates difficulty and thereby eliminates growth. He also talks in this chapter about the differences between men and women and the political implications of enforced gender neutrality, which is where Peterson's ideas are most contested. But the core of the rule, The idea that struggle and risk are not enemies of the good life, but necessary ingredients in it, is something that cuts across all those debates. Rule 12 brings everything home. Pet a cat when you encounter one on the street. After 11 rules that are demanding and often difficult, Peterson ends with something tender. This chapter is about the nature of suffering, about the fact that life includes tragedy and loss and pain that cannot be fixed, only endured. He writes about his daughter's struggle with severe arthritis beginning in childhood, and about watching someone you love suffer in ways you cannot prevent. And he arrives at a conclusion that is not optimistic in a cheap way, but honest in a deep way. Being, existence, life itself, is both suffering and beauty. They cannot be fully separated. The cat on the street is a small, unexpected gift. It's the moment of sweetness that arrives in the middle of difficulty. And Peterson's point is that when those moments come, you should take them. Not feel guilty for feeling joy in the midst of struggle. Not dismiss them because the larger problem still exists. Just let the small good thing be good. He's also making a larger point, that the way to survive genuine tragedy is not to find a permanent solution to suffering, because no such solution exists. It is to remain open to the small good things that still appear, to notice them, to receive them, to let them matter. This is, in its way, the most important rule of all. Now step back and look at what Peterson has actually built with these 12 rules. This is not a self-help book in the conventional sense. It is not telling you that the right morning routine will transform your life, or that positive thinking will attract success. It is something far more serious and far more honest than that. It is a book about what it means to be a human being in a world that is genuinely difficult. A world where suffering is real, where chaos is always present, where meaning must be actively chosen and continually chosen again. It is a book that takes you seriously enough to tell you hard things, that your life is your responsibility, that you cannot fix the world before you fix yourself, that truth, as painful as it is the only foundation that will hold. Peterson draws from evolutionary biology, Jungian psychology, biblical narrative, ancient mythology, and clinical experience, and somehow weaves all of it into something that feels personal rather than academic. His tone throughout the book is that of a man who genuinely cares whether you make it, who has sat with enough suffering to know what it actually costs when people don't take their own lives seriously. And there's something I want to say about that. This book was controversial when it came out. Peterson himself became one of the most polarizing public intellectuals of the last decade. People have strong feelings about him, and many of those feelings are understandable. But the ideas in this book, the core ideas, stand largely independent of the debates around his personality or politics. The idea that order and chaos are both necessary, and that your job is to navigate between them. The idea that meaning is more sustaining than happiness. The idea that responsibility, willingly embraced, is the antidote to resentment and purposelessness. The idea that you owe it to yourself and to the world to become as competent and honest and fully realized as you can be. These ideas have roots that go back thousands of years and have shown up in culture after culture because they point at something true about the human condition. Peterson is not the first person to say these things, but he has said them in a voice that reaches people who weren't hearing them anywhere else. And for many readers, this book was the first time someone had spoken to them like an adult about the actual difficulty of life, without flinching, without offering empty consolation, but also without leaving them without a path forward. So let me leave you with this. You started this listening because something in you was curious. Maybe you've heard about the book and wondered what all the noise was about. Maybe you're at a point in your life where things feel harder than they should. Maybe you felt quietly for a while now that you're not living quite at the level you're capable of. If any of that is true, here's what Peterson would likely say to you. Start where you are, not where you wish you were, not where you'll be when everything is finally figured out. Where you are right now. Pick one thing, the most immediate thing in your life that you know honestly needs to change. And start there. Don't wait until the world makes more sense. Don't wait until you feel ready. Don't wait until you've processed everything. Just pick up the first thing. Set your house in order, even if it's just one room. Tell the truth, even if it's just one conversation. Stand up a little straighter, even if it's just for today. Because the person you could become, if you actually took these ideas seriously, is not so far away from who you already are. They're just on the other side of a series of choices that require not genius, not luck, not perfect circumstances, just the willingness to show up to your own life and take it seriously. That's what 12 Rules for Life is really about. Not rules in the rigid, authoritarian sense, but orientation, a set of compasses that point toward the kind of life that, when it's over, you will have been glad to have lived. And that, I think, is worth every difficult step it takes to get there.